The cemetery was still half asleep when the first line of sun crawled over the horizon. Dew clung to the grass like tiny beads of glass, trembling with every breath of wind. And under that pale morning light, a young woman named Mara Ellis walked slowly between the headstones. Clutching a bouquet of white daisies so tightly the stems bent in her hands, she stopped at a marble marker near the eastern fence. Same last name. Same birth month. Same quiet corner her mother used to love. It had to be the right place. Mara knelt, the cold stone seeping through her jeans, and whispered, "Hi, Mom. I brought your favorites." Her voice quivered, but she kept speaking, telling the stone everything she had not been able to say in the hospital. Her fingers brushed away leaves that had not actually fallen there. Her shoulders shook. The morning was so silent she could hear her own heartbeat. Then a man's voice broke the stillness. "That is not the person you are looking for." Mara jerked upright, nearly dropping the flowers. She turned and froze. A tall man stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of a charcoal coat, posture steady, but eyes carrying an exhaustion she recognized instantly. Elias Ward, though she would not learn his name yet. His expression was not cold. It was wounded, as if grief had shaped the sharp lines of his face. "I am so sorry," Mara blurted, scrambling to her feet. "I thought this was... the name I must have misread. I am sorry." Her voice tangled with itself. She backed away, cheeks burning, clutching the daisies like a shield. The man gave a quiet nod. Not offended, not amused, just aware it happens more often than you think. His gaze dropped to the bouquet. "Daisies. Someone meant a lot to you." Mara swallowed. She did. She stepped back again, desperate to escape her own embarrassment. She turned too quickly. Her shoe slipped on the wet grass. She caught herself barely and forced out a shaky laugh. "I really am sorry. I should go." She hurried toward the gravel path, heartbeat pounding in her ears. She did not look back. But she felt the man's gaze linger, as if he wanted to say something more and did not know how. Behind her, Elias sank to one knee at the headstone, directly beside the one she had mistaken. The stone belonged to his wife. The grief in his eyes tightened, but there was something new there too, on echo of the moment when Mara whispered to a stranger's grave. With a tenderness she had meant for her mother, he rested a hand against the marble. "Clara, someone kind stood here today." Meanwhile, Mara reached the cemetery gate and pressed her hand against her chest. She felt ridiculous, mortified, but beneath all that, something else stirred. Curiosity, a strange pull. Who was that man? And what loss had carved that quiet pain into his voice? She shook her head, whispering to herself, "Forget it, Mara. You messed up. Just keep walking." The morning breeze carried the faint scent of daisies behind her. Mara hurried down the quiet sidewalk outside the cemetery, the morning sun warming nothing inside her. The daisies were still trembling in her grip, but she did not notice. Her mind replayed the moment she knelt at the wrong grave. The stranger's voice, the calm way he stood there as if grief was something he carried with him like a second skin. She wished she could forget his face. But the truth was harsh. She could not. By the time she reached her apartment building, the old brick structure looked even more tired than usual. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and coffee grounds from the downstairs cafe. Mara unlocked the door to her studio unit, and the familiar sight greeted her. A narrow bed tucked against the wall. A dented drawer, canvases stacked in the corner. And her sketchbook lying open where she had left it the night before. Pencil smudges covered the edges. A streak of blue paint curved across the table from a project she never finished. She set the daisies in an empty glass jar and stared at them until her eyes blurred. Her mother used to say that daisies were the flowers of stubborn hope. Lately, hope felt like a luxury Mara was not sure she had the right to carry. A past due notice lay on the counter. Her rent again. She exhaled slowly, shoulders sinking. She had been juggling cafe shifts and freelance sketch jobs for months, but the numbers never added up. The art studio she dreamed of opening someday felt like a universe away. Her phone buzzed. A message from the gallery that had reviewed her portfolio last week? She already knew what it would say. Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, your work does not fit our current direction. Another polite rejection. Another door closed. Mara pressed a palm over her eyes, fighting the sting behind them. She thought coming to the city would give her a chance to thrive, but it had only made her feel smaller. And today, eeling at the wrong grave, whispering her heart to a stranger's stone felt like proof. She was unraveling. She sat at her small table and pulled her sketchbook closer. The pages were filled with drawings she never showed anyone. Sunrises she wished she could share with her mother. Empty fields, broken chairs, windows cracked open just enough to let in light. She flipped to a blank page and tried to draw the man from the cemetery, but her hand trembled. She shut the book before the pencil touched the paper. I need to focus, she whispered to the quiet room. I need a real job. I need something. A soft knock startled her. It was Mrs. Harding, her landlady, holding a folder of tenant documents. Her expression was apologetic, but firm. Mara, dear, I hate to push, but the rent was due last week. I have someone interested in your unit if you cannot catch up. Mara's heart sank. I just need more time. I promise I am trying. Mrs. Harding nodded gently. I know you are, but I cannot hold it forever. When the door closed, Mara sank into her chair, feeling the weight of everything at once. The rent, the gallery rejection, the grave mistake. The stranger's eyes, all of it pressed against her ribs like a tide rising too fast for her. To breathe, she forced herself to stand. She grabbed her apron from the hook by the door and tied it around her waist. She had a shift at the cafe in 30 minutes, and she needed every hour she could get. She glanced once more at the daisies in the jar, then whispered, just one more day. Let me get through one more day. As she headed out, the morning light spilled across the cracked floorboards, brushing her sketchbook like a quiet promise she could not hear yet. By the time Mara reached the cafe, the morning rush had already begun. The bell over the door jingled every few seconds. The scent of roasted coffee beans wrapped around her like a warm blanket she desperately needed. She tied her apron tighter and stepped behind the counter, trying to bury the heaviness sitting in her chest. Morning, Mara, her coworker called. You look like you did not sleep. I did not, Mara admitted, forcing a small smile. Just a long day already. She started taking orders, moving from the espresso machine to the register and back again, letting the rhythm steady her. The hiss of steaming milk, the clink of mugs, the hum of quiet conversations, all of it felt familiar, predictable, safe. Then the bell chimed again. Mara glanced up, panned, nearly dropped the cup. In her hand, standing in the doorway, was the man from the cemetery. The same calm posture, the same charcoal coat, the same quiet sadness in his eyes. For a heartbeat, the cafe noise faded. All she could hear was the rush of her own pulse. He did not seem to recognize her at first, which gave her exactly 1 second to decide whether to duck behind the pastry shelf and pretend she did not exist. But it was too late. His gaze lifted, and their eyes met. A flicker of surprise crossed his features, followed by something gentler. He stepped forward. Mara swallowed hard and turned back to the register, tending to read a receipt that was actually blank. Next, she said softly. He approached the counter. Good morning. His voice was steady, warmer than she expected. She forced her eyes up. Morning. What can I get for you? He paused, studying the menu as if buying time. Just a black coffee, medium. Her hands moved mechanically. Name for the order? Elias. The name pressed into her chest like a soft echo. She typed it in and stepped aside so her coworker could prepare the drink. She focused on wiping the counter on anything except the fact that he was still standing there. You work here? Elias asked. Mara nodded, eyes fixed on a tiny spill she had already cleaned twice. Yes, mostly mornings. He hesitated, then added, I did not mean to startle you earlier. At the cemetery, a rush of heat climbed up her neck. You did not. I mean, you did. But that was my fault. I should have checked the name. I was not paying attention. You were grieving, he said quietly. No one reads clearly through grief.
At.
His words made her chest tighten. She tried to smile, but her voice wavered. Well, thank you for being kind about it. Her coworker set the cup down. Medium black for Elias. Elias took the coffee, then glanced back at Mara. Take care today. She nodded, unable to find anything coherent to say. He stepped outside, and the bell chimed one last time. Mara let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, but fate was not finished when she walked home after her shift. The sky opened suddenly, rain drumming hard against the pavement. Her thin jacket soaked through in seconds. She hurried toward the intersection, blinking water from her eyes. When a large black umbrella appeared above her, she startled and turned. Elias stood beside her, holding the umbrella over both of them. Coat already wet at the shoulders, as if he had run to reach her. You are going to freeze out here, he said. I am fine, she insisted, though her shivering betrayed her. Let me walk you, he said simply. The rain softened around them, the umbrella forming a small, quiet world in the middle of the storm. For several steps they walked in silence, their shoulders almost but not quite touching. Mara finally spoke. Why were you near the cafe today? Do you live around here? Elias shook his head. No, I had a meeting nearby and needed a moment before it started. I remembered the cafe from years ago. She nodded, unsure what else to say. Her hair stuck to her cheeks, and she felt both exposed and strangely safe under the umbrella he held so steadily above her. When they reached her building. Thank you. For this, he handed her the umbrella. Keep it. The weather will be rough all week. But then you will get soaked, she protested. He offered a faint, tired smile. I will manage. She held the umbrella close, unsure why it felt like more than a simple gesture. As he turned to leave, Mara whispered, Good night, Elias. He paused, as if her voice caught him off guard. Then he looked back at her through the rain. Good night, Mara. The next morning, Mara woke with the umbrella leaning against her bedside table, still beaded with dried rain. For a long moment, she stared at it, replaying every second under its shelter. Elias's steady voice. The gentle way he angled it so she would not get wet. The tired softness in his eyes when he said goodnight. She pressed her fingers to her lips, embarrassed at how quickly the memory warmed her. At the cafe, her shift carried the familiar rhythm. Orders, coffee, steam, the steady hum of customers. Yet every time the doorbell chimed, a quiet part of her wondered if he would walk in again. She told herself not to expect anything. He was just someone she met by accident, someone whose grief happened to brush against her own. But fate has a strange way of circling back. That afternoon, on her walk home, she noticed a small art fair setting up along the sidewalk. White tents lined the street, painters arranging canvases, photographers setting up displays. It reminded her of weekends her mother used to take her to events like this. She almost walked past but some part of her needed the color, the noise. The hope she wandered between the booths, stopping at a stand with watercolor cityscapes. Sunlight glimmered off the glass frames. She leaned in closer, studying the way the artist captured shadows on tall buildings. You have an eye for the quiet parts of a picture. She startled and turned. Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets, as if the crowded fair had simply parted to place him at her side. His coat was different to daylighter, casual, but his presence held the same calm gravity. Do you always appear out of nowhere? Mara asked, half smiling. Only in the places I visit to think, he replied. I have been coming to this fair since before the renovation. He paused. I did not expect to run into you again. Mara hugged her arms loosely. Neither did I. They moved slowly along the row of booths, pausing whenever something caught her attention. Elias did not rush her. He did not fill the silence with unnecessary words. He simply walked beside her, listening with the kind of patience she had forgotten existed, at a stand near the end. Mara spotted a painting that made her breath catch. A worn wooden window opening toward an amber sunrise. The brushstrokes were loose, imperfect, full of life. It reminded her of the mornings she used to sketch with her mother. That one is beautiful, Elias said softly. It looks like... "Hope," Mara whispered. For a moment, she forgot he was a stranger. They stood shoulder to shoulder, both staring at the same sunrise frozen in paint. She felt something shift in the space between them, quiet, delicate, maybe dangerous, as they continued walking. She asked, "You said yesterday that you remembered the cafe from years ago? Do you live far from here?" "Not far," he answered. "But I am moving between places lately." He hesitated, then added, "Life has been complicated." She sensed grief behind the words, the same echo she heard at the cemetery. She wanted to ask more, but his expression drifted toward the ground, and she knew pressing would be unkind. Instead, she said gently, "You do not have to explain anything." His gaze lifted to her with a grateful softness she did not expect. They reached the last booth, where a street musician was tuning a guitar. People gathered, murmuring, waiting for the first chord. Mara stepped a little closer to listen. The air hummed with anticipation. Then she heard a small sound beside her. The faint crack of a breath Elias tried to conceal. When she turned, he was staring at a painting hanging behind the musician. A simple portrait of a woman, her smile warm and familiar. Elias's eyes shuddered, grief rising like a tide. Mara touched his sleeve lightly. "Are you all right?" He blinked hard. "She looked like someone I lost." Mara felt her own loss stir in her chest, mirroring his. Two griefs, different but strangely connected. "I am sorry," she whispered. Elias nodded once, the movement tight. The musician struck the first chord, a soft, aching note that drifted across the fair. People swayed. The sky faded into soft evening gold. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers, Mara and Elias stood close enough to feel each other breathe. Two wounded souls finding an unexpected place to rest for a moment. When the song ended, she said, "I should head home. May I walk with you?" He asked. She hesitated only for a heartbeat, then nodded, as they stepped away from the fair. Side by side again, neither of them noticed the vendor quietly wrapping the sunrise painting they had admired. Someone had purchased it. Mara walked with Elias beneath the soft glow of the streetlights, the sounds of the art fair fading behind them. The evening air smelled faintly of rain and warm pavement, a mix that always reminded her of late nights drawing on her bedroom floor when the world felt too heavy to face. She hugged her sketchbook against her chest, unsure when she had even taken it out of her bag. Only knowing she felt safer with it in her hands when he was near, they crossed a quiet intersection, their steps matching without effort. Elias kept a respectful distance, yet there was something unmistakably protective about the way he walked slightly on the outside of the sidewalk, shielding her from passing cars. He did not speak, but the silence between them had shifted. It was no longer awkward. It was thoughtful, like both of them were waiting for the right words to appear. "How long have you lived in the city?" he asked gently. "Almost 2 years," Mara replied. "I came for art school, but I could not afford the program after my mother got sick. I stayed anyway. I guess hope makes people stubborn." Elias's gaze softened. "Hope is the bravest form of stubbornness." She laughed quietly, surprised by how easily he said things that felt true. They reached her building faster than she expected. The brick facade loomed above them, worn and uneven, but Elias looked at it as if it was important, simply because it was part of her world. "Thank you for walking with me," she said. "I wanted to make sure you got home safely." He replied. There was a pause. One of those moments filled with unspoken things. Mara shifted her weight, suddenly aware of the umbrella still resting near her doorway from the night before. "Do you want to come in for a moment?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Not for long. Just, I have tea, or water, or I can find something." Elias hesitated, not out of discomfort, but out of something deeper, almost like fear. Then he nodded once. "Only if you are sure." "I am," she said softly. Inside, her apartment felt painfully small. The narrow hallway, the single lamp, the stack of canvases leaning crookedly against the wall, everything looked more fragile now that someone else was here. But Elias stepped in quietly, as if he understood how much space belonged to her. and did not want to disturb any of it. He paused beside the table where her sketchbook lay open. The pencil marks were rough, unfinished. A half-drawn sunrise stretched across the page. "You draw light well," he murmured. Mara's cheeks warmed. "It is the only thing I know how to draw without thinking." He looked at her, the question unspoken. So she gave the answer before he asked. "My mother and I used to chase sunrises," she said. "When she got sick, I started drawing them instead. It made me feel like I could keep them for her. Like maybe she could see them through me." Elias's jaw tightened. The kind of tension that comes from swallowing memories that still hurt. "I understand that more than you know." He reached into his coat slowly, as if debating with himself, and pulled out a small folded paper. Mara watched him set it on her table. It was an old photograph, edges worn from too many times being held. "This was Clara," he said. "My wife." Mara felt her breath catch. The woman in the photo had bright eyes, soft smile, and the kind of radiance that made the world feel gentler. Mara touched the edge of the picture carefully, afraid to leave fingerprints. "She was beautiful," Mara whispered. "Yes," Elias said quietly. "She was." A silence settled, heavy but honest. For the first time since meeting him, Mara felt the full weight of his grief. It did not push her away. It drew her closer. "I did not mean to step into something painful," she said. Elias shook his head. "Pain is less sharp when shared." The room felt smaller then, but not in an uncomfortable way. More like the air between them had changed shape. He studied her again, his voice low. "Mara, yesterday, when you stood at the wrong grave, it reminded me of something Clara used to say. She believed strangers crossed our paths for reasons we could not see yet." Mara looked down at her hands, the pencil smudges, the small tremor in her fingers. "Do you think she would approve of you talking to me?" "I think she would be grateful you talked back," said. The words settled inside her like a warm ember. When Elias stood to leave, he paused at the door. "May I see you again?" Mara nodded before her voice could fail her. "Yes, I would like that." He stepped into the hallway, but not before offering one last quiet promise. "I will return your umbrella soon." She smiled. "Keep it as long as you need." The door closed softly, but the echo stayed with her. The next few days passed with a strange kind of lightness. Mara still worked early shifts, still worried about rent, still faced the quiet ache of missing her mother. Yet something inside her felt less heavy. Every morning she caught herself glancing at the umbrella leaning against the wall. Every evening she wondered if Elias would call, even though they had never exchanged numbers. But he had said he would see her again. And for reasons she could not explain, she believed him. On Friday afternoon, while wiping down the cafe counter, her manager approached her with a clipboard. "Mara, we are short on staff for the charity gala catering job tonight. It pays double. Can you take the shift?" She almost said no. She felt too tired, too stretched thin. But the rent notice replayed in her mind, and she nodded. "Yes, I can do it." By 7 that evening, she was dressed in the catering uniform, black slacks, white shirt, hair tied back neatly. The event was held at one of the city's oldest art institutes. It was the kind of place with marble staircases and chandeliers that seemed to float like giant glass clouds. As she stepped inside carrying a tray of sparkling water, her breath caught. Paintings lined the walls, soft yellow light pooling beneath each frame. It felt like stepping into a world she had always viewed from the outside. Guests in tailored suits and elegant dresses drifted through the hall, laughing softly, clinking glasses, speaking in polished tones. Mara kept her head down, staying near the edges of the room. She focused on her task: replace empty glasses, offer the tray. Step back. Then she heard a voice through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Hale Foundation's annual gala." Mara froze. Her heart thudded hard against her ribs as she turned toward the stage. A well-dressed host continued speaking, reading notes from a card. "Tonight we honor a man who has quietly funded countless art scholarships, community workshops, and preservation projects. Someone who prefers to remain behind the scenes, but whose impact is felt across the city." Mara's fingers tightened around the tray. He is the reason many young artists have been able to follow their dreams. The crowd applauded, and then, "Please welcome our guest of honor, Elias Ward." The tray slipped. She barely caught it before it hit the floor. Elias stepped onto the stage, dressed in a dark suit, composed, dignified, and unmistakably someone far beyond the ordinary man she thought she knew. The lights reflected against his cufflinks, the room leaning toward him with a quiet reverence. The murmurs around her swelled. That is him? He kept the foundation going alone after his wife passed. He never appears at events. This is surprising. Mara could not move. Her legs felt made of stone. Elias stood at the microphone, thanking the room with that same calm voice she recognized. The same gentle tone he used when talking about sunrises and loss. But now she heard something else: authority. Wait, power. Power he had never mentioned. Power he had hidden. Her breath tightened painfully. He had known she was struggling. He had walked beside her, listened to her, stepped into her tiny apartment. Without saying any of this, she took a step back, bumping into another server. "Are you all right?" The woman whispered. "Yes," Mara lied. Gripping the tray to steady herself, Elias began speaking about art programs, about honoring creativity in the city. His words were thoughtful, genuine. But Mara heard only the echo of everything he did not tell her. The distance between the stage and the catering corner felt like a lifetime. When the applause rose again, she slipped out of the hall, heart pounding, breath sharp. She pushed through a side door into a quiet corridor lined with framed photographs. The hallway was dim, almost cold, the walls pressing close around her. She leaned against the wall, trying to swallow the burst of confusion and hurt building in her chest. He was a philanthropist, a leader, a man with influence and wealth far beyond anything she had imagined. And he had said nothing. Not even a hint. Suddenly she heard footsteps. Mara. Her eyes shut with dread. Elias stood in the doorway, concern tightening his features. "I saw you leave," he said softly. "Are you feeling unwell?" She stared at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You did not tell me?" He stepped closer. "Tell you what?" "That you are." "This," she said, gesturing toward the ballroom. "All these people, this entire world. You let me think you were just someone passing through. Why?" Elias's expression shifted, guilt, regret, something like fear. "Mara, I was going to tell you." "When?" Her voice cracked. "Before or after you let me feel safe with you." He took a slow breath. "I did not want my name to be the reason you talked to me. I wanted you to see me as a person, not a title." Her chest tightened again, but this time with something sharper. "I did see you as a person, Elias. I just did not know you were hiding." He looked down, jaw tense. "Mara, please," but she shook her head. Stepping back before he could finish, "I need air," she whispered, and she walked past him, leaving the light, the music. And Elias standing alone among shadows, Mara pushed through the side exit and stepped into the cool night air. The city lights blurred behind the burning in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around herself, the catering uniform suddenly feeling too thin, too tight. Too small for the weight pressing against her chest. She walked until the sound of music from the gala faded completely. Only then did she stop beneath a street lamp, breathing hard, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. She was angry. But beneath the anger lived something far more dangerous: hurt. Deep, unexpected, impossible to ignore. She whispered to herself, "You should not have trusted him so easily." She leaned against the cold stone railing of the museum steps, staring down at the umbrella she still carried, the same one he had handed her in the rain. She had held on to it because it had felt like a promise. Now it felt like a mistake. Footsteps approached from behind. "Mara." Elias's voice was soft, breathless, as if he had searched every hallway before finding her. She did not turn. He stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. "I should have told you sooner." She closed her eyes. "You think that is what this is about?" "The title. The wealth." He hesitated. "Most people care very much about those things. But I am not most people," she said, her voice shaking. "I do not care that you have money. I care that you look me in the eyes, walked beside me, came into my home, and still let me believe you were someone else." He swallowed hard. "I was not pretending to be someone else. I just needed a moment to feel ordinary. To talk without people expecting something from me. You were the first person who gave me that." Mara finally turned to face him. His expression was raw, honest in a way that only grief could carve. "That is not fair," she whispered. "You gotta know me fully. My struggles, my life, my apartment. But you kept an entire world hidden from me." He stepped closer. "I was trying to protect the only genuine connection I have had in years. By lying to me?" She asked. The question broke him a little. She saw it in the way his shoulders dropped. "Mara," he said quietly, "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," she murmured. "But you did." Silence between them stretched, painful and fragile. A car passed, light sweeping across them like a slow spotlight. Mara held the umbrella tighter, as if it could shield her from a truth she did not want to face. Elias spoke again, barely above a whisper. "If you walk away right now, I will understand. But I hope you do not." She looked at him, really looked at him, this man who carried grief in his eyes and wealth in his name, and who stood before her looking more lost than she had ever seen. "I need time," she said. He nodded, acceptance flooding through him like a quiet surrender. "I will wait," he murmured. Mara stepped back, breathing in the cold air, then turned and walked down the steps, leaving Elias alone beneath the street lamp, watching the distance grow between them. The next morning, the world felt strangely quiet. Mara sat at her small table, sketchbook open but untouched. Her pencil hovered above the page, refusing to move. The gala replayed in fragments, his name echoing through the speakers, the applause, the look on his face when she walked away. She tried to tell herself it was better this way. That distance would protect her, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the grief in his expression and felt the ache resurface. By noon, she forced herself outside. She needed air. She needed clarity. She wandered through the city without direction, letting her feet carry her past familiar corners, past the cafe, past the bookstore where she once spent rainy afternoons, and finally toward the small community gallery she often passed but never entered. A note taped to the door caught her eye. "Exhibit opening today, invitation only." Mara turned to leave, but the gallery attendant stepped outside at that exact moment. "Are you Mara Ellis?" the woman asked. Mara blinked in confusion. "Yes," the woman smiled warmly. "Then this is for you." She handed Mara a small envelope. Her name written on the front in elegant handwriting she recognized. Immediately her pulse quickened. Inside the envelope was a simple card. "Come in. Trust me, E." A tremor ran through her. She pushed open the gallery door. What she saw inside made her breath vanish. Every wall, every single one, was covered in her art. Sketches she had thrown away. Paintings she thought she would never finish. Work she had forgotten she created. All framed. All lit with warm gallery lights that made each stroke glow like something precious. In the center of the room stood the sunrise painting from the fair the one she had loved. Below it, a small plaque read, "Light belongs to those brave enough to chase it. Artist, Mara Ellis." Tears welling, she moved from piece to piece, recognizing memories she had buried, moments she thought were lost forever. Someone stepped into the doorway behind her. "Mara." She turned. Elias stood there with his hands at his sides, not approaching, not assuming, simply waiting. His expression was open, vulnerable, the kind of honesty he had not known how to give before. "I found your work in secondhand shops," he said softly. "In piles of discarded art? In online listings? I searched because I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you." Mara pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "Why would you do all this?" "Because you deserved someone to fight for your light," he said. "And because hiding who I am cost me the one person who made me feel human again." He stepped closer, but not too close. "Mara, I am not asking you to forget what I did. I am asking for a chance to do better, to be better, with honesty, with truth, no more hiding. The room fell into a quiet stillness. Her eyes drifted to her art, filling the walls, glowing under the lights. No one had ever believed in her like this. No one had ever taken her dreams seriously enough to lift them into a space like this. She looked back at him. "I am still hurt," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "and I will wait as long as it takes." Mara exhaled shakily, emotions battling inside her. Fear, hope, pain, possibility. Finally, she took one step toward him. "Then let us start with honesty," she said, for the first time since the graveyard. Elias truly smiled, soft, relieved, grateful, and Mara felt something inside her begin, very gently, to heal. For days after the gallery opening, Mara felt as if the world had shifted half an inch to the right. Not enough to overwhelm her, but just enough to let the light in at a different angle. People wandered through the exhibit, leaving warm comments in the guest book. Some asked about commissioned work. Others inquired about future collections. For the first time in a long time, Mara felt something she once feared she had lost completely: possibility. Elias kept his word. He did not rush her. He did not push for answers. He simply showed up when she asked, stepped back when she needed space, and remained steady in the quiet places she had once faced alone. Every conversation between them was different now, clearer, softer, built on truth instead of assumptions. A month later, on a calm Saturday morning, he invited her to a small rooftop space above the City Art Institute. She climbed the narrow staircase and stepped into a garden of soft greenery and warm lanterns. The sky glowed with early daylight, the kind her mother used to chase. At the center of the rooftop stood the sunrise painting he had bought, the same one that had stopped her breath the day they walked the fair together. Elias turned as she entered, a faint smile lifting his expression. "There is something I want to show you." Mara walked to his side. Below the painting, the plaque had changed. The new inscription read, "Dawn Window Art Studio Director, Mara Ellis." Her breath caught. "Elias, what is this?" "A place that belongs to you," he said. "A place where you can create, teach, and grow. The Hell Foundation will fund it, but the work, the direction, the soul of it, those will be yours." Tears blurred her vision. "I do not know what to say." "You do not need to say anything," he replied gently. "You earned this. I just helped open the door." Mara reached out, touching the corner of the painting lightly. She felt the warmth of the promise behind it, the weight of a future she'd never imagined possible. When she turned back to Elias, his expression shifted, hopeful, steady, full of a quiet affection he no longer tried to hide. "There is one more thing," he said, slipping a hand into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small box, not extravagant, not meant to impress, but meaningful in a way that made her chest tighten. Inside was her mother's silver necklace, the one she thought had broken beyond repair after years of wear. But the clasp had been fixed, polished, restored with care. "I wanted to give this back to you," he said softly. "Whole again." Mara covered her lips with her fingers, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Elias, thank you." He stepped closer, lifting the necklace gently. "May I?" She nodded. He clasped it around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin lightly. When she turned, their faces were inches apart, breath mingling with the soft morning air. "Mara," he said, voice low, "meeting you was never a mistake." She looked into his eyes, the grief, the healing, the hope, and whispered, "Maybe it was the best wrong turn we both ever made." He laughed quietly, relieved, and pulled her into a tender embrace. The sunrise washed over them, warm and new, and on that rooftop, surrounded by growing light, Mara finally felt herself step into a future that belonged to her, one built on truth, courage, and a love that had begun with a single mistaken moment at dawn. If you want the bonus epilogue, comment yes so I can continue the story for you. Now, let us return to our main character.